Hi, welcome. I'm Mary and I hook books. And this is going to be my December wrap up. And it's probably going to be a little bit chaotic. I'm watching my neighbor's kittens. So, yeah, we're just going to do the best we can before I have to go to work today. So, strap in. We have a lot of books and crochet projects to get to. One of the first books that I want to talk about is the Kaiju Preservation Society, and I love John Scalzi. There are a lot of critiques of this book about how the characters all kind of sound the same, but they all have this same sarcastic, funny humor about them that just works for me. And in the author's note, he actually says, "This is not a symphony. This is a pop song. It is just something fun that he needed to write to get through the pandemic. And we all did what we had to do to get through those early days of 2020. So, I made a monster for the Kaiju Preservation Society, and I don't remember, I didn't give this 5 stars, but I still really did enjoy this book. I did not realize I had several books that actually took place during the early days of the pandemic. So I also read The Cuckoo's Cry, and a lot of these books I bought a long time ago, obviously. And I'm trying to get to my backlist and tackle my TBR, as they say. So I had forgotten what this was about. It was sold or blurbed as a thriller, and I didn't see anything thrilling. I just kind of was disappointed. I mean, the very, very, very end was a little bit thrilling, but nah. I did like that in the early days of the pandemic, they couldn't hug people. So one of the things that one of our main characters did was leave crocheted hearts and notes throughout her city. So I made a little crochet heart to heart bomb her city as well. I also read the third Finlay Donovan book, and I love Finlay Donovan. Again, there are some critiques about the Finlay Donovan series, but I really enjoy it. I think that it's very realistic. Like, if you read the very first scene of this book as a mother, you will relate so much if you had to take care of your kids during the day. So she goes to a police academy to, get research for her book, but to continue on with the plot that started in book 1. And because she is a writer, I made a little book, and I have to sew in my end. I have really hoped the ends fairy comes for me someday soon. I also have been working on reading the sequels in my series, and I read the third book in the Rex Nihilo series, The Wrath of Cons. And I love these books. This one in particular, if you are one of my students, you know I love a good pun, and this was so punny. It was all I could ask for. It was beautiful. And I love the characters. They're so goofy and absurdist and sci-fi con man pirates. The alien mob mafia. Like, what more could you want? But in the very beginning of this book, our robot star, Sasha, she just wants to quit and make donuts. So I made a super sprinkly donut. I love Jodi Taylor, so a while back I got a sale on some of her work, and one of those is White Silence. And I love her Time Cop series. I love the Chronicles of St. Mary's. This was just okay. It is kind of cool if you're into the like vague magic kind of stuff. It did have some cool ghost story type elements to it that I liked, but I don't think I'm gonna continue in the series. It was pretty neat though that I didn't realize that it took place over Christmas. I hope they're not getting into too much. So, I made these cute little Christmas mittens. I was all over the place with my reading, from really cozy to post-apocalyptic. So I have a little bit of whiplash. I needed a lot of palette cleansers. This is one of the lighter post-apocalyptic books that I read. We Shall Sing a Song Unto the Deep. And it's very short. Post-apocalyptic monk pirates. So, because of singing Into the Deep, I made this little blue note. I think I may have to just acknowledge that cosmic horror is not for me. I read The Ballad of Black Tom, and it had been pretty hyped. Everyone that had heard of it seemed to really love it. And I thought it was okay. I mean, if you're into like that, I'm sure it had a lot of references that I didn't quite get because I don't know that much about Lovecraft. You would enjoy it more than I did. It does really deal with race relations in New York in the 1920s, framed through cosmic horror. So that aspect was pretty cool. I think my expectations might have been a little high. So I didn't rate this one super high, but I got to make one of my favorite patterns, my baby Cthulhu. So there's that. I started the month out with some zombie fiction from my backlist, and I read Zombie Fallout. I think this might have been for me about a decade ago. I feel like our zombie fiction has just been so elevated in the last decade or so because of The Walking Dead, Shaun of the Dead, 28 Days Later. So I think 10, 15 years ago, I really would have liked this. The humor is kind of fun. It's a little bit meta. They have zombies in their world, or they have zombie fiction in their world, so they're trying to figure out what kinds of zombies they are. It also takes place in Colorado, which is where I'm originally from, so that was pretty fun. But overall, I think I gave it like a 2.5. I probably would have rated it higher about 10 years ago. I couldn't really think of much to make, so the housing development that they live in is called Little Turtle. So I made a little turtle. I read another Joe Hill this month, and I thought it was a short story collection because all the Joe Hill I'd read so far were short stories, but it was a full-length novel, and I enjoyed this more than I thought I would. I liked the horror. It is dark though. Like, look into stuff if you have issues with certain kinds of violence or drugs or any of that. But I really did kind of like the gray morality of all the characters. I loved the dogs, of course. So I think I gave this like a 4.25. I really liked it. It was an interesting take on a ghost story that then got darker and darker as things went along. So for the heart-shaped box, I made a heart-shaped box. And one of my books is technically classified as horror, but it made me feel so cozy. I read an X-Files book, The Truth Is Out There, and it really reminded me of the fun Monster of the Week X-Files episodes that you used to get. There weren't a lot of alien ones, but there were a lot of different kinds of things. They were set in all sorts of different places throughout Scully and Mulder's timeline. So it really did feel like, putting X-Files on in the background like I did when I was younger, to just have something fun and a little weird but not too scary on. And like I said, there weren't that many aliens, but aliens is what we know and love about our X-Files. So I made this little gray alien dude. I am really trying to get through more of my series, so I read Murder and Mendelssohn this month, and I generally don't like historical fiction, but there's something about Phryne Fisher that I just love. She's so liberated, and she has just such a caring but cold aspect to her at the same time. Murder and Mendelssohn, I guess at the end, the author's note said that it was a Sherlock Holmes and Watson retelling, if, like, the gay subtext could just be text. And, this book was a lot longer than most of them, and it had just so much going on. So it wasn't my favorite of the Phrynes. You did get some really cool backstory about her role in World War I and how that negatively affected her and still affects her years later. And her lover of the month or week or whatever Phryne decides to have is a doctor that she met during World War I. And he is coming to grips with his sexuality. So I made this rainbow themed first aid kit carrier. I really felt a reading slump coming on, so I DNF'd the one nonfiction book this month that I was trying for, which actually I started last month. And this is another case of 10 years ago, I would have loved this, but I'm not in academia anymore. I don't have to respect the structure. I just want to read and maybe learn something and have some fun. So I DNF'd A Stoic's Guide to the Good Life. It really didn't make enough of a argument for why it was better than Buddhism or Zen Buddhism. I mean, he might have gotten there if I got farther. I think I got 40% or so into this book, and if you really are into Greek history, this could be a really cool one. But I just felt a reading slump coming on, and I did not want to have to force myself through. Again, 10 years ago, I probably would have loved this, but this month, it was a DNF. I was really trying to avoid a reading slump, so I really leaned into the thrillers and the cozies, which I know seems counterintuitive, but those are things that really grab your attention. So I read Under the Whispering Door, and I, in the beginning, did not think that they would be able to redeem this character enough for me, but enough. And I really liked the rest of the characters. I really liked this light-hearted yet serious take on death and grief and family, and it had a very sweet queer romance, so I really liked it. In the book, they go to Charon's tea house, so I made a tea bag bookmark. I also read a very anticipated cozy, Bookshops and Bone Dust. Oh, you want to come back up? Okay. And it wasn't as good as Legends and Lattes, as everyone has said. It was still great though. There was a lot more action, so if that's what keeps you from enjoying cozies, is that there just nothing ever happens. This does not have that problem. It was different following Viv from when she first started being a mercenary, because in Legends and Lattes, she obviously is retiring to open a coffee shop, in case you didn't know. So it was very interesting to see where she started, and I always do enjoy a prequel or a backstory. And she makes very good friends with a baker, so I made an ogre-themed cupcake in honor of those two bestest gal pals. A major win this month was Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers, and the Goodreads Choice Awards gets a lot of things wrong, but they got this one right. This was adorable. It was a very sweet, found family, but also like, hey, everybody could be the murderer. So it was such a fun ride, and that is really what I needed. So I gave it 5 stars. And because she owns a tea house, Vera Wang's world famous tea house, I made a little teapot, short and stout, with a little removable lid to it. And if you have Netflix, you've probably seen that Leave the World Behind was a very popular movie that came out recently, and the book had been on my TBR. Once I started reading it, I was like, oh yeah, I remember the thing everybody said about this that they didn't like. It does ground you in every single little detail of these people's lives. And if you are not there for the random thoughts about this or that, the entire grocery list and how much they spent, then it might not be for you too. It does stop doing that quite as much once the action starts, but I can see how that really did turn off a lot of people. I also watched the movie, and the movie gives you so many more answers. Not that many, but so many more answers, which I really would have liked from the book, at least a few more answers. And the ending, I was like, what? That's it? That's where we're gonna stop? So it was not my favorite. If someone wants to enlighten me about the symbolism, etc., etc., I just meh. It was just meh. It was an okay reading experience. It did keep me engaged, but just meh. One of the things that I saw online that I guess pre-warned me that it was gonna be weird was watch the deer. So I made a little deer. And the deer, yes, are a thing in the book. I think they're more important in the movie. And also, there's a lot more sex in the movie, or in the book, than there is in the movie. So just be warned going into that. It also is a little bit different. Ruth in the book was the wife, not the daughter. I thought that did bring an interesting dimension to the movie, but either way, it was just okay. And I read 2 more books where the world was on fire. So I let one project stand for both of them. The first one was Aftermath by LeVar Burton. And yes, LeVar Burton wrote a post-apocalyptic book with like all the trigger warnings. He kind of ruined my childhood. I was like, oh, reading Rainbow? Like, no, reading Rambo. It was so much. And starting with the author's note, it was savage. LeVar Burton is a savage, and I respected it. I actually did enjoy it. I think I gave it a 4-star. It kind of reminds me of if The Stand wasn't so pretentious and weird and long. So I liked that part of it. I'm trying to watch the kittens so that they don't destroy everything in my house. So LeVar Burton, savage. Great book about the aftermath of what happens when they assassinate the very first Black president of the United States. And this was written in 1998. So it is very relevant. One that I also liked that was a little bit more lighthearted. It's still about the end of the world and nuclear war, but you know, just a little bit lighter, a little bit of spooky. We don't know quite what's up. The murder mystery wasn't quite as prominent as I thought it would be, but I really enjoyed The Last. And these people all get trapped at a hotel, and they think that they are the last people on Earth because the last thing that they see is everyone's phones with news alerts saying that, you know, they bombed Washington, they bombed Seattle, they bombed LA, and then Paris and Munich, and that just everything goes down. The internet goes down, their phones go down. So they think that they're the last people on Earth. And then they find a dead body, and it looks like she was dead before the end. So it was an interesting slice of life murder mystery, and it was about an American who was, I think it was supposed to be in Switzerland for a conference. I don't think that the author is American. She kept using things like torch instead of flashlight, jumper instead of sweater, stuff like that, which didn't ruin the reading experience, but it did take me out of it when our character is supposed to be one of the only Americans in this hotel. But I really did enjoy it, and I made for those two a World on Fire inspired blanket. So that was my reading and crochet wrap up for the last month of 2023. How did your year end? Were you also fighting a reading slump? I hope that you are taking care of yourself, staying warm, and just remember, keep your shoulders back, your head up, and breathe. Okay, we're gonna showcase the cutie patooties that I've got hanging out with me today. Oh, can you hear that? Oh, and it's the little runty baby hanging out. Who could abandon these little kittens, huh? Who could ever leave you guys outside in the cold? Yeah. I don't know if they even have names, but aren't they just so adorable? Okay, we'll see if their sister is around here somewhere. And this one was already in my video. Isn't she so super cutesy wootsy? Say hello to the peoples. Okay.